The contradiction takes different forms. It is, or one of the core forms is the contradiction between concrete labor and general labor. Another dimension is then between what happens in terms of production, meaning the generation of value, the creation of value, and the market as matter of the realization of value. Part of this contradiction, or part of the solution of this contradiction, is that things do not take place at the very moment in the very same time. And you find the typical example: something is produced in China today and it is sold within 6 months, or in 6 months somewhere in America or in Europe. Sometimes it is as well that we do not know exactly the structures behind it. That we have the famous Swedish car manufacturer, and it's a kind of national flagship, Volvo, which is now owned by some Chinese investors. So we don't know always what is behind it, what we see. And this is sometimes as well kind of disguising the contradictions or delaying that the contradictions are getting virulent. But they are there. And it is this kind of phenomenon that we have today, profits so huge that they don't know how to reinvest the money, where to reinvest. But at the same time, the profit rate is very small. And then we have, if you remember the circle, we have the contradiction and divergence of interests, sometimes, or to some extent, within ourselves. At least most of us are consumers and, whatever it means, workers. This can be manual work, physical work, brain work, housework, even if this is usually not paid for. But as consumers, we are, of course, interested in getting stuff for a low price. Who wants to pay more than necessary? In the extreme case, who wants to pay what is necessary if it is possible to get the same stuff below what is considered to be necessary? And then you find these things where, again, it is difficult to assess the situation, what exactly is behind it, and how it is resolved. That you see something in the shop and they charge you 1,000 yuan for it. This is not as expensive. But they charge you 1,000 yuan for it. And then you say, oh, this is really lovely, I would like to have it. But 1,000 yuan, I don't have this. Can't afford it. And then you try to forget it because you don't want to worry about it, and you come back next day or a week later or a month later and you see it for 10 yuan. I'm wondering why do they charge me on the one hand 1,000 and then the other day 10 or 50 or 100, at least a very small amount of the original price. How is that possible? Is it simply ripping off with 1,000? That the real value is only whatever they charge you during the sale? There are different mechanisms behind it. And there is, of course, this ripping people off, just putting a label, a price label onto something, and then selling things over value if you want. But then there is as well something else, like shifting the burden from one place to another, asking others to pay, and different ways of actually justifying a high price. They are sometimes very complicated. You don't have to worry about it here. But in any case, what do I want to have as worker? Do I want to produce stuff that is very cheap? It basically means I won't get a high income. I want to have a high wage. But in one way or another, it increases the price of the final product. So I'm split there. And I say, you can always take it from wherever you want, from personal experience. I want to say I want to have lecturers doing their job and being there for 24 hours per day and being there not only for lectures but as well in their office and giving advice and debating with the students. And of course, this is what I want to do. I want to do good work, and I want to have a good remuneration for it, good wage. And then I say, I want to have education for my daughter, and I have to pay for it, I know this, but I want to have it as cheap as possible. So don't pay the lecturers money, just leave them on a starving wage that they just can't survive. Employ videos and all this, they don't have to be there for office hours. They don't have to engage via email or whatsoever. That's it. It's cheap. And I don't want to pay a huge amount of money for anything. And then there is a certain threshold where I say, okay, this is okay. If you sometimes buy food, you think this apple doesn't really taste like an apple. It tastes like, I don't know from which chemical company produced. It doesn't have any flavor, there's nothing to it. In the extreme, you would say, okay, I won't buy this, but at the same time, where is the limit? How much are you ready to pay for what? Then you have the entrepreneur who is at the same time consumer. And even if it is only the consumption of means of production. He wants to produce, or she wants to produce, and at the same time needs to buy certain machines, certain tools. And as much as there is the aim of producing something valuable, producing something that is valuable, meaning for which I can charge a huge amount of money, I have at the same time the interest of buying raw material cheap, of buying machines and tools cheap. Which means as well I want to sell cheap because I know the other entrepreneur and the consumer will buy more. Contradiction. The marginal rate and the profitability, as I mentioned, where we have actually exactly this phenomenon that the production of things is getting cheaper and cheaper. If you think about computers today, even if we say it's still quite a lot of money we pay, actually it is nothing. It is nothing if you consider what is in it. So I don't know the prices now, and I don't know the technical dimensions, but you get a computer today for, let's say, 5,000 yuan, but this computer has the capacity of a computer that cost you 50,000 or 500,000 yuan a couple of years ago. Actually, a couple of years ago, it was not even possible to build such a computer, to build a computer with this capacity. The capacities in your mobile phones is the capacity of a computer 20 years ago. What do you pay for your mobile phone? Nothing, if compared with what you would have paid for a computer those days. This is what you have to consider. If you have a car today, they are so cheap, in particular if you consider what you get for it. These cars didn't exist 20 years ago. With any car today, you buy at the same time a computer. There's so much electronics, information technology in it. I'm not talking about the GPS and all these fancy things that you see, but the basic things to get the machine running. The comfort you have in a car today, including that you don't hear anything while driving, or not much, is part of it. So you have to think always about these dimensions, putting things together. And this is behind this marginality rate. The internet use with the telephone is more or less free. It's included in your basic fee you pay. When all this started, you paid for, I don't know, first probably for kilobyte and then for bytes we cannot imagine anymore. Today it doesn't cost anything in relative terms. Then you have the profitability in terms of what do you get out of it. And then you have this thing called Moore's law. It's about the technological progress, what I just said. There is so much today in these things, much more advanced than it had been, I don't know how many years ago. The capacities, the productivity of things increased tremendously. The short definition, simplified version of this law states that processor speeds or overall processing power for computers will double every 2 years.
In 1965, when mainframe computers were just beginning to use integrated circuits, Gordon E. Moore published an article in Electronics magazine in which he predicted a very bright future for the computing industry. By tracking the evolution of integrated circuits to date, Moore predicted that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit would continue to grow exponentially. This observation became known as Moore's law.
The message I was trying to get across was that integrated circuits were the road to less expensive electronics. It really evolved from being a measure of what goes on in the industry to something that more or less drives the industry.
If you compare the first microprocessor, Intel's 4004, to today's 14 nanometer processor, performance is now 3,500 times higher. Energy efficiency is improved 90,000 times, and the price per transistor has fallen by over 60,000 times. If automotive technology had progressed at the same rate, cars would go almost 300,000 miles per hour, get over 2 million miles per gallon, and cost only 4 cents.
No other technology that I can identify has made progress at that rate, nor has any had such a profound effect on the society throughout the world. And certainly in 1965, I would not have predicted the kind of products we make today. They're spectacular.
Moore's law has driven Intel and the industry to make the impossible possible and to completely transform computing to create amazing experiences.
The potential is there for this change to continue, and I'm continually amazed at where it seems to be going. Just remember, whatever has been done can be outdone.
So this was a little bit advertisement by Intel, meaning it is a film taken from the Intel website. And leaving the concrete figures aside, I forgot them already again, but it is amazing if you consider the dimensions we are talking about. It's not just doubling something in a short period of time, but it is the multiplication of performance and the huge reduction of the prices. And this is as well exactly the problem of the entrepreneur who has these capacities, who uses these capacities, and knows at the same time the profitability, meaning the profit I make out of it, is decreasing. If you look at server capacities, well, the first thing is you can say, I don't need them anyway. I don't have a server. And then the next thing is, I don't know, you use Bangor email address, this is the one thing, and you may have your own private email address, which is one of these companies. When they started, you had to buy, well, you got some space free which was very limited, meaning every second day you would have to delete your emails because this was limitation. Or you paid for additional space. Today, if somebody speaks about a gigabyte, you say, what is gigabyte? This is so ridiculously small. It's unlimited. And this is exactly the problem in terms of the entrepreneur. They have to provide all this that doesn't make immediate profit. And for them it is, of course, cheap. Cheap to buy it and cheap to provide it, in order to make profit at some other, in some other areas. And that means as well that speed is increasing. Velocity of money, we talked about it, but as well the velocity of products, if you want, that we produce things and as soon as they are coming or going out for sale, they are already old. You have already the next model somewhere in the laboratories that is near to be marketed. You buy every year a new computer, every year a new mobile phone. Cars, every year a new model. And sometimes it is, of course, difficult for us to say, is there a real difference in terms of the value? I heard this genius now saying, there is no real difference when I buy the iPhone 7, but I can sell actually some little device that the iPhone 6 looks like an iPhone 7, which is much cheaper. I don't know if it's true, to which extent it's true, but I believe that there are definitely such cases. And it's not only that you find it in terms of high-tech products, but it is as well when it comes to clothes. The material, the protection, waterproof. If you buy a bicycle, if you buy food, it's all better, more healthy, biological products. Sometimes I don't know, we have to be careful. As I said, you don't know really if it is improved. And sometimes you have to look, and this is a serious economic problem, that in many cases, of course, there is a deferral of costs. You go to the supermarket, it's all about environmental friendly and environmental protectionism now and biological products. Then you go, first you went to the special shop selling bio products. Now you find them in every supermarket. When I lived in Ireland, I saw in a supermarket biological products, biological pears, I think. So you have two fruits on one of these, I don't know which material, but it's definitely not good, some kind of plastic styrofoam or something. and wrapped into foil and carried from Italy to Ireland. So it is all good for the environment, biological products, and then I thought the amount of lead or of whatever you use to get this kerosene-laden aircraft to here, to get the fruit here fresh, I don't know if this is worthwhile and justifies to say this is a biological product. So there's always this problem of, okay, we are getting faster, computers are getting faster today, but at the same time the need, what they need to move is so much more, and there is so much waste they have to move, that one can say at the end of the day, the computer we use today does more or less the same speed as it did 15 years ago. For the worker, this contradiction, we will go to employment at a later stage, and it is, of course, all this technological process rationalization is a problem when it comes to employment. We need employment, and the best way of securing employment is actually keep it with manual work, don't rationalize, allow us to work, meaning take up employment. So if a machine takes over, we are worried. We lose our job. We cannot play with mirrors. This is all done by the machines. It's all taken over. We lose the fun of doing things because we are reacting in a mechanical way and reacting or working like a machine. There is no real creative aspect to it. There is not this exploration of what happens actually. And at the same time, we can say as well, if these machines can do the work, why should we do it? Why should we all have jobs, not all, but many jobs we don't like? Why can't we say, if there is this replacement, then we can be happy. Things are getting easier. Everybody can do it. If you ever drove a truck, an old truck, without power steering, you know what it means to drive a vehicle that needs physical strength. This was hard physical work. Today, I can sitting there, steering wheel, okay, just with one finger you move this thing. It's a machine doing the job. It's great. We don't have to invest all this physical power. Now we may have these self-driving cars. Why should we drive? Let the car drive for us. Just tell the car, drive for me. And if I don't want to go there, just drive on your own. I stay at home. We can use time for other things. But living in a society where we depend on employment, we cannot do this. We have to say, no, I want to do even the dirty job, the boring job, the whatsoever job, in order to maintain my existence, in order to get an income. As I said, the consumer, of course, has the interest of buying stuff cheap. And at the same time, she wants to buy good quality stuff. And good quality stuff is that still requires human input, human labor as input. So you have the contradiction, on the one hand, in ourselves, in terms of the consumer who wants to buy cheap, but knows he has to buy more expensive, she has to buy more expensive because this is the better quality, usually. And you have the contradiction between different roles. On the one hand, we are consumers and want to buy cheap, and we are workers and we want to produce getting a fair wage. And this is part of it, that in many cases, the entire process depends on this kind of shifting costs. Meaning I reduce your income as entrepreneur, because this is one way at least of reducing costs. Income equals costs, so I reduce them. You can see whatever you do with less income. I am looking at the cost side, you are looking at the income side. But I have the power to determine these conditions, so I will reduce it, I will keep it low. Keep it low means literally lowering the labor cost, lowering the income, and it means as well getting more out of you. And there are different ways of getting more out of you. The one is work harder, reducing the societal time, and these are management strategies. Management strategies in terms of you have to make use out of your time. And one of these bold systems is actually setting a submission date on the 15th and saying that's it. I could say as well, submit at some stage. It doesn't matter. Now, this is something I could say, but even there I would be limited because I have to submit at some stage the marks. So when, let's assume it's the 1st of January, it is not, but I don't know the date. Let's assume it's the 1st of January. I say, it doesn't matter. Submit before the 31st. Or or on the morning of the 1st. I can mark all the papers. Then the 1st of January I have to submit in the evening. So it means I put myself under pressure. There's always some way of externalizing or shifting the cost, shifting the burden. In the usual case, it is shifting the burden to the worker, work harder, and there are these methods, Taylorism, going hand in hand with Fordism, that people stood there and looked at what are you doing? Is this really necessary to perform? If you remember the film Kitchen Stories, this was exactly about this. Looking at a way of rationalizing the work, of limiting whatever is needed to perform. If you have everything you need in your kitchen, in your workplace, wherever, in reach, it's perfect. So try to organize it in this way instead of having something here which you permanently need, and then you have to go back, get it, do it, put it back, go back, and do the other work. Organize it in such a way that is rational, that allows you to perform better. Put the pen here instead of there. Here I can reach. If it is uncomfortable for me, not a problem. Because me is not me, it's you. I know it is uncomfortable, but I don't mind because you are actually doing this. You have to stretch yourself. I only can say it is better for me in terms of profitability. Or longer working hours. It is another means. I extend the time. You still get the same, basically the same amount of money, same wages, but I extend the time you are working for me. Consumers, as I said, the quality of the products is not the same, is not maintained. As an entrepreneur, I know my products do not have the same quality as I want them to have, but at the same time, they are good enough to be sold. This is actually something you find. I know a couple of small publishers. They say the way I produce books now is not the way I would like to produce them, but it is the only way to be competitive. So what happens? That's always the easiest, talk about something you know about, that I as author have to do the proofreading, have to do the formatting, have to do everything, and the publisher only prints. I have to develop at least part of the advertisement strategy for the publisher and tell them exactly the target group of a book, the customers. I have to gather all the information. Is there an alternative to this book? A competitor? This was the old publisher did this. I had to write it. They looked for the strategy on the market. They looked as well for what is the best way of writing the book in terms of advising me. Today it's standardized, and I have to do it, and the publisher says, actually, I would like to do it in another way. I would like to have a proper binding. I would like to have a nice book with hardbound and whatsoever, but I cannot do it. So this is a conflict you see in different ways. And you can translate what I said in terms of capital and labor. Capital is depreciated, transfer of value, and labor is appreciated in terms of creating value. You can say as well, consumer goods are depreciated. The value of these items is less and less. And at the same time, the purchasing power has some problems with the appreciation. We need it. The question is, what can we buy on the market? And this is about the depreciation of goods. Even if we think many products are better, they are actually not necessarily better. They look better, but in terms of, if you look behind the label, they are not. The computer today looks better, seems to be faster, seems to be more productive, but at the same time, if you look at if you look at the price ranges, at the value behind it, it is not. So you have there exactly this mechanism of a decreasing of a fall of the profit rate. We get less and less. We get less and less in addition. I mentioned this example from communication. The step from traditional letters to the fax and then to the email. To the facsimile, you have a huge step, a major break, and then to the email, it doesn't make really a major difference. And that's the end of this story, and we'll start a new chapter then in the next